Ladies and gentlemen, if you thought that Ezreal was not going to be a thing in this game after the release of Call of the Mountain, well, then clearly you haven't been playing Legends of Runeterra. We now have Ezreal Targon. So that's what we're going to be doing in this video, is kind of dissecting the Ezreal Targon deck. As always, going through the deck itself, followed by 2 games. Actually, as of late, sometimes 3 or 4. But in this case, 2 games, because Ezreal Targon games are a lot longer than usual. But if you're new to the channel, definitely hit the subscribe button. We got tons of deck videos coming soon, as well as some crazy good footage of some crazy good tournaments that are going to be happening soon, i.e. the Ascent of Targon Invitational in the next 2 weeks. So hit the subscribe button, hit the like button if you enjoy the video and you appreciate the content. And without further ado, let's get into this new Ezreal Targon deck. Alright, so as easy, whatever you want to call it, as always, this is just a typical Ezreal deck. So you know what that means. We are trying to go off with Ezreal late game, leveled up with a bunch of burst spells. And burst spells, you ask? Alright, well, we got some new additions here with Targon now. If you go ahead and look at something like Mentor of the Stones, you can see we get 3 gems in hand when this bad boy gets killed via Last Breath, and the gem itself is a burst speed spell, but crucially cannot be played during combat or in response to a spell. So you do have to essentially have priority on your turn to play this card. And you know, if you have a bunch in your hand, you can play them all at once. Your opponent still can't respond, but you very crucially have to have priority. So that is a little bit of a downside if you are looking to burst out the game with Ezreal and a bunch of gems in your hand. But as usual, we got the normal burst spells here. We got some Rummage as a 3 of. We also have 1 Chump Up in here to give us some Mushroom Clouds here as usual. But not as many burst spells as normal. You know, you don't see any Jury Rig or anything in here. And notably only 1 Chump Up, right? So we are kind of all in, or not all in, but mostly in on the gem strategy. But with this gem strategy, and with Mentor of the Stones actually getting you 3 gems, we can more reliably run discard draw mechanics like Rummage, which is why it's a 3 of. You usually don't see Rummage as a 3 of, maybe in a Karma Ezreal deck, just because it's a discard 1 to draw 4, right? Which is pretty freaking good with Karma on the field leveled up and Enlightened. But now we are playing 3 in Ezreal Targon. We have Spacey Sketcher, also discard to invoke something, and super strong card for early on in the game, too, to kind of stave off some aggression from your opponent. You know, you get something like the Serpent, which is a 0 cost, 2 attack, 1 health challenger unit. You can kind of pick off one of those units on your opponent's board, especially with a lot of fearsome units nowadays. You can do something like even play a Serpent, play a gem on it, pick off a Callista or some other 3 health fearsome unit. Or even without a gem, you got plenty of 2 health, you know, fearsome Arachnoid Horror and stuff like that. So pretty decent card in general, and that's just one of them. I mean, you also have the 3 cost Stun 2. I think it's Crescent Strike. Still getting familiar with all of the Celestial cards, but that's a 2 target card. So if you pull something like that 3 cost Stun 2 units, not only are you basically eliminating one of your opponent's attack turns, but you're also getting 2 targets for Ezreal, which is super good. Going more with the discard mechanics, we got 2 Zonite Urchins. There's so much discard in here that I've seen versions actually run Flame Chompers, which can be okay sometimes, to be honest with you. I've opted to not run Flame Choppers in here, actually going with more Guiding Touch instead, just because Guiding Touch, another new card from Targon, anything with draw in this deck feels really good. So this version of Ezreal it's probably more weighted towards drawing into your win condition than it is stalling out the game, as usual with like Karma Ezreal and basically every other Ezreal archetype, right? Most Ezreal archetypes, you want to just sit there and defend and stave off your opponent for as long as possible, and then oh hey, I drew into Karma Ezreal, great, I win the game. This one, you're trying to actively draw a little bit more, which is why you have, you know, so many Rummage and Zonite Urchins and Guiding Touch and things like that. Obviously the 3 Static Shock, so a lot of draw in here. Another card that obviously we cannot go without mentioning, Hush. This card is, I gotta say, you know, So for Ezreal, this card can give you 3 targets in a turn. Actually, 4 technically if you have 13 spell mana. But it also, if you have even 9 mana, usually hushing 3 things on one opponent attack turn can just basically prevent that attack turn from really being of any impact, right? And you'll be able to kind of give yourself the extra 2 turns. But it's also burst. So it's another burst spell that basically is a 3 of if you have Ezreal on the field. But interestingly enough, Hush also directly counters Ezreal. It's no longer correct to necessarily attack with Ezreal or open attack with a leveled Ezreal to get that Mystic Shot, because if you pass the action back over to your opponent, they can now play Hush and completely wreck your win condition. So a lot of times with the gems, gems you do need to play with priority anyways, you're going to want to throw the Ezreal down just leveled with the win condition. You don't want to actually need to attack with the Ezreal. So just something to think of there. Pale Cascade, another absolutely spectacular card in general. It draws cards, it buffs stuff. You can save things on your field, such as Mentor of the Stones if you want to give something else a +2/+2 buff, or even an Ezreal if it is targeted with something. And Tri-Beam Improbulator. Woo! This card is fire! I love this baby. You know how many? I got this up to, in a deep matchup one time, I got this up to deal 9 to a unit. You won't actually see it in these 2 games, but God, I love this card. It's so fun, and it's so good. It really is good. I think it's priced for 4 mana very efficiently as well. So, but without further ado, we're just going to get into these 2 games that we have right now. Ezreal Targon. I can show you guys what I'm talking about. All right, so we have 2 matchups here. One is Midrange Frostbite. The other is just some sort of weird aggro deck. You guys will see. But generally speaking, aggro has a decent matchup against this deck. Midrange, not so much. This deck in particular is actually the Midrange Frostbite deck of old, which has since seen a little bit of a nerf since Assessor has changed. And I do apologize. This is at 250% speed right now. Hopefully that's okay, because the Ezreal Targon games can go for a little while. So, but anyways, you can see here, getting that Celestial card to start, right, is so incredible. So the Solari Priestess is got to be, in my, probably the best Celestial card getter, if that's a thing, in the game right now, just with the actual spells and units that it can pull. Something like this Meteor Shower is going to do work for me, especially against this deck. You have these Glory Seekers that are 1 health. That Meteor Shower picks them off with the second part of the effect. And then you have a lot of 4 health or 3 health, in this case of Ashe, units. And this right here is this one play kind of just blows out the game. And that's one of the big ways that this deck can succeed, is just by getting some of those larger slow speed removal spells. So the opponent generally is going to have to open attack. That's one of the ways that you punish a lot of these Celestial decks, because they don't really have responses to open attacks other than being able to block with whatever units they have. Technically, you have Pale Cascade, which you can play in response to an attack and buff up a unit and maybe positively trade, but your opponent needs to be open attacking. And the problem with this mid-range deck is that mid-range decks usually, they can open attack once their board is established, but the problem with Ezreal Targon is it's usually not going to ever let you establish a board, which is what we keep doing. We keep using these larger spells to keep, pace with our opponent. You see us obliterate the Ashe there, and, they're never really able to establish any sort of wide board. Now, we actually let this attack through with this 4/4 because we have some other plans. We got this Tri-Beam Improbulator, all right? But we also have this Mentor of the Stones, which will continue to increase the Tri-Beam Improbulator. So one of the things, Frostbite kind of stinks here just because of this, just because of the Mentor, not being able to really get the full value we wanted with that Priestess, buffing it 2/2. But one thing I've noticed, these Mentors with this Ezreal Targon deck, you need to be prioritizing them, right? I found that there's some matchups I've played where I actually get blown out playing the Ezreal Targon deck because my opponent is playing Targon and hushes the unit, or in some other regions, if they do have a Purify and Demacia, which I do think is a much better card now because of cards like Mentor. If you don't get those gems, sometimes it can really hurt you, because the way that this deck plays now, you kind of need the gems. not for discard fodder for rummage or anything like that. You just 100% need the gems to like win the game with Ezreal, right? So another card that I actually didn't mention when we went over the deck itself, Mind Splitter. Infinite Mind Splitter. This bad boy of a dragon here. Woo! This card does work. You can see it right here, stunning this Ashe and the Yeti. Like, so we're already up in cards slightly. I know a couple of them are gems in there, but we are a little up in card advantage. This Mind Splitter also just shuts down our opponent's attack turns every single turn now. And they're passing again, right? So they have no way of dealing with this Mind Splitter. Generally speaking, the only way that they will be able to deal with it is something like a Frostbite Culling Strike or Frostbite Reckoning, etc., etc. The elusive unit is interesting. I grabbed this unit as a Celestial card for this exact reason, to start putting pressure on my opponent. They can Culling Strike it, of course, with the Pale Cascade. Obviously, they couldn't Culling Strike it, but being able to do that 3 damage every turn kind of puts them on a clock, because it's a lot less than my Ezreal is going to have to do. I could probably just win with like a Mystic Shot and get excited towards the later parts of the game. This Frostbite, though, leads me to believe that we are going to see a Reckoning come down. Here's the Crescent Strike I was talking about. I think I nailed that card name correctly. Yes, let's go. All right, Crescent Strike. We actually don't pick it, but that's the card I was talking about, where it does target 2 units, and it gives you more targets towards the Ezreal proc there. Mind Splitter, though, also gives you 2 targets, if you didn't know, so just something to mention there. But we do finally see the Improbulator come out, and this card, it's just so good. Look at that. We dealt 5 to a unit, and we get a Moose on the board. The Moose has been loosed, okay? Is it loosed or loosened? Loosened sounds not right. So, but that's one of the reasons why we decided to go with the Celestial spell that we took. Actually, I think it's like Moonglow or something. I forget the name of that one, but you get +2 health and Spell Shield, because we knew we were going to get a 5-cost unit. And any 5-cost unit, generally speaking, with +2 health is going to be able to trade with what they had on their board at the time. But regardless of that, we get the Ezreal. Once we get the Ezreal, game over, in the bag. We just basically start casting everything in our hand, and we go ahead and take game 1. So Midrange Frostbite, generally speaking, you're going to win that matchup. Now, Aggro, on the other hand, a good aggro deck should generally beat Ezreal Targon. There's some fearsome decks floating around. You have discard aggro floating around. That's pretty good right now. So they usually have a pretty good shot, depending on how the Ezreal deck draws. Obviously, if it just draws all its removal, like Thermo Beams and Mystic Shots, etc., it's going to be tough. But I don't really know what this aggro deck is. It's like, it's Darius, and then, like, you guys will see this. It's actually kind of nuts what this deck is trying to accomplish. So anyways, and you see, like, this Trifarian, right? This card is in the first set, I'm pretty sure, and I have no idea what this card name is, because it's literally never been played. Trifarian Hopeful, thank you. It's like my prior self heard my future self and knew I would need that card name. So Trifarian Hopeful, it's supposed to gain 2 attack if you play it when you have another Noxus unit on the field. And, obviously looks like he was forced to just curve it out due to, whatever else his hand might have looked like. So we do just want to get rid of it. We want to go ahead against any sort of aggro deck with this Ezreal Targon deck. You want to 100% stay ahead on tempo, which is one of the reasons why, although this is a difficult decision here, it actually isn't a difficult decision. Like, I thought for a little while about this before I went ahead and played this Thermo Beam, but Zed is a big deal. Zed matters. So we're going to go ahead. I'm considering the Ezreal because in this matchup as well, there's usually not going to be a lot of removal. So that's something else to note. When you're going against an aggro deck, depending on what it is, right? If it's fearsome, there's not going to be any removal, really. If it's discard aggro, there will be get excited and stuff like that, so you might not be able to play the Ezreal. But in this case, I'm thinking, okay, if I play this Ezreal, I might be able to attack with it, get some free Mystic Shots. But if I did that turn, I actually wouldn't have the mana for the Mystic Shot, so I go for the Thermo Beam, get rid of the Zed, which Zed is... You can't let Zed stick around. Not as a control. It literally needs to just leave the second it hits the field. So we do opt for the Thermo Beam. We do see some House Spider action coming out now. And again, we need to deal with the field, but at the same token, we don't want to waste good removal on something like a House Spider. This is probably one of the lesser threatening cards in the deck. The Culling Strike actually confused me. Like I said, I have no idea what this aggro deck is. I have no idea why an aggro deck like this would be playing Culling Strike, because my thought is that playing Zed and Darius, there's not going to be Culling Strikes in there. But hey, what do I know? The Culling Strike comes out on the Ezreal. No big deal. We got 2 more. It's fine. It's fine. And as you'll see here in a little bit, Written in the Stars is a thing. Which is this right here? No, this is... that's right. She can't get Written in the Stars. So Written in the Stars is another Celestial card that costs 4. So Spacey Sketcher cannot get it. But what we do get is this card that I keep talking about, which is so good as a Celestial card in Ezreal Targon, and that is Crescent Strike. And we're going to see that here in a second as to why that is so freaking amazing. So we're thinking a little bit here of what we want to go ahead and do. There's really... We don't want to attack. We want to be able to trade this Spacey Sketcher evenly into this token if possible. We could Pale Cascade, which is something I think I'm considering a couple times there, just to trade with this with the Housebiter, but it doesn't really feel great. We also want to keep the spell mana, and that's something to take into consideration, is that if you have spell mana against an aggro deck on almost every turn, it means you're in a better position, generally speaking. It means they haven't out-tempoed you to the point where you need to be expending all of your mana every single turn, which is good. But yeah, the Crescent Strike, boom, shuts down Darius, shuts down Housebiter, so good. Now we play the Pale Cascade, and now we're actually able to get a block off and save our unit. We get another... Whatever they're playing should not be playing Culling Strike, but we get the Culling Strike out. I absolutely don't care about losing a Spacey Sketcher with a Pale Cascade to a Culling Strike, because I've already gotten the value out of both cards. Pale Cascade replaced itself. Spacey Sketcher got the double stun off, and now we're actually going to go ahead and Static Shock, it looks like, to get 2 additional targets. Now, what I will say is I'm a little bit concerned at this point in the game, because I only have like targeted, super targeted removal that honestly you want to attempt to try to save to go face if possible. That's really the only removal I have left in my hand, and I don't want to have to get excited and Mystic Shot on the Darius. That's just going to feel super, super bad. So this Mentor is definitely a halfway decent draw. We do decide to play the Zaunite and get rid of the Rummage, mainly because we could have played the Rummage, and that's one of the things that I like about something like Spacey Sketcher and Zaunite and Rummage in this deck. You're playing a lot of discard draw, meaning a lot of cards that in order to draw, you need to actually discard cards like Zaunite, like Spacey Sketcher, like Rummage. Well, on the flip side, a lot of times those cards can be pretty useless, which will feel really bad, right? Like you have a Rummage, you don't want to discard 2 cards in your hand. But the good thing is that you are playing so many of them that usually you can use one to discard one of the other discard cards, if that makes sense, right? So like in this case, we're using the Zaunite to discard the Rummage to still get some draw while not completely destroying our hand and getting rid of a card that we probably won't be able to use right away, which is pretty good. So, our opponent just had an attack turn. And another card that's super good in this deck as a Celestial card is the Messenger. We don't want to go with the Crescent Strike because, A, we already have the Ezreal leveled up. We don't need more targets. We got plenty of that shit. We got plenty of targets. We good. What we need is Ezreal because the freaking Ezreal ended up getting Culling Strike. And what do you know? We got Written in the Stars. And yet another, this is one of the reasons why Targon is so good with Ezreal right now, is that a lot of these Celestial cards, you're almost always going to hit a Celestial card that is good for your situation. 9 times out of 10, right? Written in the Stars, right here, right now, is busted. We tutor the Ezreal because it's the only, that's one of the good things about only playing Ezreal. A lot of other Ezreal decks have another champion, right? Ezreal Karma has Karma. This only has Ezreal. So now you always are going to get Ezreal with Written in the Stars. The Ezreal is also going to be +2/+2, which means when Ezreal's leveled up and hits the board, now Culling Strike, your stupid Culling Strike that for some freaking reason you're playing in this deck, it ain't going to hit Ezreal. So we are going to be able to get, not only that, it costs 1 less too, which means we'll have more mana on that turn. So I think this actually levels the Ezreal. So I think the Static Shock actually is the last procs that we need to level the Ezreal here. So, and we do get rid of, obviously, the Housebiter as well. So, one of the concerns, the elephant in the room here, is this Darius. How are we going to deal with this Darius? Well, it's one of the reasons why we're getting a static shock down. So obviously the first reason is to go ahead and level up this Ezreal. The second reason is we need to start digging. So like I mentioned when we went over the actual deck itself, this deck is, as far as an Ezreal deck is concerned, it's a lot more draw oriented. It's a lot more, okay, we're going to find the Ezreal than we're going to stall for the Ezreal, which is why we need to start getting some of these draws through. You know, you have something like Hush that you can draw into, which will buy you essentially another turn. Late game, when you're at max mana like this, Hush is absolutely incredible because it completely blows out your opponent's turn, and you have these chump blockers on the field.
There's no way there's another.
In this case, Dawn and Dusk gets wrecked by Hush. Why? Because now we're gonna pre-Hush the unit, which I actually almost made the mistake. I remember thinking this through. I almost made the mistake of letting it go through and thinking, oh wait, I can Hush all 3 Darius. Well, what if he has another Dawn and Dusk? Then I'm screwed. Well, duh, you can just Hush the first one. So don't make that, don't be me, don't make that mistake. He gets 2 other Darius that are only 10-5 and very crucially don't have Overwhelm. So like right there, Hush probably just won me the game, and that's why that card is just so ridiculously incredibly good, to be honest with you. And we still have another one in our hand. We don't need to do anything. We can chill, we can relax. We can block all of these. We can block every single Darius, no problem. Not only that, this Mentor, when it does block, is going to get us the gems that we need to go ahead and take the game away. So we just go ahead, we line up these blocks. Obviously, we want to put more damage onto the Darius that will actually live, as the other 2 are ephemeral. So we can just chump block those. If he has some other sort of overwhelm effect, we can go ahead. We have 2 Hushes left. Now, I didn't need to Hush here, per se. I mean, maybe you could argue that I probably even shouldn't have, because there's no need for me to make sure that this damage gets onto the Darius. But you could argue both sides, right? I mean, what I was thinking during the game is, well, that will put the Darius in a spot where I can now just Mystic Shot it and kill it in case I need to, in case somehow my opponent gets back into this. They still have the stun, which feels kind of bad, but at that point, I know I've won the game, right? I have the tools. We have the tools. We have the tools to win the game. We drop the Ezreal very safely. We know he can't kill it. We have the 3 spell mana bank, and now we can just go off burst next turn. I think we're at 1. I actually think do I play the Hush here just to get, yeah, I think I just play the Hush to get the fleeting version. So it puts him down to 13. I have 6 with the gems, and then I have 2 Mystic Shots, 1 Get Excited. I'm gonna go out on the limb and say we might be a winner. We might be a winner. We win. We win. Why? Because it's Ezreal. Why? Because Ezreal is Ezreal since the beginning of this freaking game, and all he does is win. If there's one person that likes that song, it's freaking Ezreal. Alright, and that is going to do it for Ezreal Targon. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. The deck is pretty fun to play. I don't personally think it's going to do that incredible throughout the entire format. I think it's kind of flimsy. I think it can be, the strategy can be messed with a little bit too easily. As an example, Hush on the other side. So I love the fact that Hush is not just a benefit to the Ezreal deck, but also a huge issue for it when your opponent has it. So we'll see. I could be wrong. I could be right. Who knows? But as always, until next time, everybody stay healthy, stay positive. I hope shit just works for you. Peace out.